Jasmine Crockett, senior White House advisor, was denied a room at Magnolia Grand, the very hotel her husband founded. Just 5 minutes later, Victor arrived and turned the entire situation upside down. What seemed like a minor slight triggered a sweeping reform across the entire hotel chain overnight. If your partner was cast aside because of their political beliefs, would you stay silent or change the whole system? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The sun was starting to set over Austin when Jasmine Crockett stepped out of her black Rolls-Royce in front of the Magnolia Grand. She had just finished a long, exhausting week in Washington, full of tense meetings, press battles, and political pressure. This hotel, built by her husband Victor Steele, was meant to be her safe place. But Jasmine didn't want attention. She booked her room under her mother's name, Laverne, Washington, hoping to rest without being noticed. No interviews, no cameras, just peace. But just as Jasmine stepped into the glow of the Magnolia Grand's grand lobby, something felt wrong, like a note off key in a familiar song. The space looked the same. Soaring ceilings, golden light washing over white marble floors, the soft hum of jazz trickling from hidden speakers. But the air had changed. There was tension beneath the polish, something unspoken but sharp. Jasmine walked toward the front desk like she owned the place, because in a way she did. Her husband, Victor Steele, had built this empire brick by brick. She wasn't just another guest. She was family, legacy. And yet, the moment she locked eyes with the woman behind the counter, she could already sense the shift from welcome to warning. Sloan stood behind the desk like a gatekeeper, not a hostess. Early 20s, lavender-dyed buzz cut, eyebrow piercing, matte black nails tapping the keyboard in slow, deliberate rhythm. Her face was polite but unreadable, except for the slight curl at the corner of her lips, the kind that said, "I know who you are, and I've already made up my mind." She didn't even say hello. Jasmine, composed and cordial, spoke first. "I have a reservation, Laverne, Washington." She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just gave the name and waited. Sloane's eyes flicked to her screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then nothing. A long pause. She tapped a few keys without urgency, then looked up with a practiced, condescending smile. "I'm sorry, that name's not coming up in our system." Jasmine, still calm, pulled out her phone. "I have the confirmation email right here," she said, holding it out. Sloane didn't look at it. She didn't even lean forward. Instead, she crossed her arms, her voice light but laced with passive defiance. "Sometimes the system's delayed. You know, syncing issues." A shrug. "Also, we have certain expectations for our guests. We're a very values-driven space." Jasmine stared at her. "What expectations exactly?" she asked, voice low and tight. Sloane's smile widened just enough to feel insulting. "Progressive values, equity, environmental awareness, respect for marginalized voices. You know, the usual. We try to make sure this space stays aligned with those ideals." Jasmine blinked slowly. She knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't a glitch. This was judgment. It was deliberate, calculated. A soft, sanitized rejection wrapped in buzzwords and fake politeness. Jasmine had faced public attacks in front of national cameras. But this was personal. A young receptionist who thought she had the moral high ground, looking down her nose at a senior White House advisor in the very hotel built by Jasmine's own husband. And Jasmine wasn't just being denied a room. She was being disrespected, erased, right where she should have been untouchable. Sloane had drawn a line, and without raising her voice, without saying Jasmine's name, she'd already fired the first shot. Jasmine said nothing at first. She simply unlocked her phone, her movements smooth and practiced, the way one might draw a weapon in a standoff, quiet, deliberate, with intent. She scrolled once and held up the screen. "Here's the confirmation," she said, her voice firm but measured. "Suite 1503, booked this afternoon, 3:42 p.m. Name on the reservation, Laverne, Washington, that's me." The email was crisp, professional, complete with a reservation code, a barcode, and the Magnolia Grand signature at the bottom. Everything was in order. It was not a request. It was not open to interpretation. It was a fact. Sloane leaned forward, not to read the screen, but just enough to perform curiosity. Her eyes barely flicked over the phone. She didn't take the device, didn't cross-check anything. Interesting, she said, drawing the word out like it meant nothing at all. We haven't had issues with the system today, but sometimes it misfires. Technology, you know. She gave a smile that was all lips, no warmth. Then, without touching the keyboard, she took a small step back, folding her arms tightly across her chest. Either way, she continued, we're very intentional about who we accommodate here. There's more to hospitality than just clicking book now. Jasmine blinked slowly. Her eyes were sharp, but her tone stayed cool. Is that right? She asked. So what exactly am I being disqualified for? Being too prompt, too polite, or too quiet? Her words didn't rise, but they landed like iron. Sloane smiled again, wider this time, but not kinder. We aim for a certain kind of energy here, she said vaguely. We curate the space. There are expectations. We want guests who align with our mission. Inclusion, awareness, social harmony. People who walk the talk, you know? Her voice was soft, but there was an unmistakable steel thread of judgment underneath it, wrapped in pretty words but sharp enough to cut. Jasmine stared at her for a long moment. She wasn't confused. She was calculating. This wasn't about a glitch. It wasn't about a double booking or a miscommunication. No, this was something far more intentional. The email had been seen. The facts had been presented. Yet the gate was still closed. She wasn't being turned away because the room wasn't available. She was being turned away because she wasn't. No screaming, no confrontation, just a subtle wall, built brick by brick from passive-aggressive phrases and moral superiority. Jasmine had seen politics dressed in velvet gloves before, but never like this. Not here, not in her husband's hotel, and never with a smile so carefully trained to look harmless. As she stood there in her own husband's hotel, holding undeniable proof of her reservation, while being calmly, politely erased, a reel of memory began playing in her mind. Not memories of speeches or press briefings, but of quiet injustices, ones people don't always see unless they've lived through them. She thought of Marcus Langston, a close friend and fellow DC survivor, a former Marine, decorated, disciplined, and proud. He drove a black Rolls-Royce, not because he was flashy, but because he earned it. One summer afternoon, he pulled into a gas station in suburban Virginia, wearing a navy blue America First t-shirt. Not a slur, not a threat, just 3 words. But it was enough to make the cashier tell him, you need to take that off or take your business elsewhere. No discussion, no service, just a look of fear disguised as moral high ground. Jasmine remembered how stunned Marcus had been, not angry, just broken. I fought for this country, he told her later, and now I scare people at a gas pump. And then there was Dr. Elaine Wu, a tenured professor at a liberal arts college in upstate New York. Elaine had written a keynote about the importance of intellectual humility, about how freedom of speech didn't mean agreement, and how discomfort wasn't danger. 20 minutes before her talk, a student organizer pulled her aside. The message was clear. Some students feel unsafe with this topic. We're replacing your segment with a mindfulness session. Elaine didn't scream. She simply packed up her notes and left the stage in silence. Jasmine never forgot the look on her face that night, like someone who realized the rules had changed and no one told her. These weren't accidents. They were warnings. And now, standing in front of a smiling receptionist who refused to even look at her confirmation email, Jasmine realized she wasn't the exception. She was just next. This wasn't about her booking. It wasn't even about this hotel. It was part of a wider script, playing out across the country in soft tones and polished language. A quiet revolution where virtue replaced fairness and where being unapproved, by a stranger's standard, meant you no longer belonged. This wasn't hospitality. This was ideology in uniform. And for the first time that day, Jasmine felt not just excluded, but deeply, deliberately targeted. She gripped her phone just a little tighter. The weight in her chest wasn't shock anymore. It was understanding. This wasn't a system glitch. It was the system working exactly as designed. And suddenly, this wasn't about getting her room. This was about drawing a line in the marble. He walked across the lobby with the measured calm of a trained negotiator, walking into a closed-door meeting. Her heels struck the marble floor in slow, deliberate beats. Her expression was neutral, but beneath it, her mind had already gone surgical. She didn't need to yell. She needed the truth, and she knew exactly where to find it. She slipped around a corner near the concierge desk, back to the wall, screen already lighting up in her palm. She scrolled quickly, bypassing dozens of contacts until she reached one marked only. Luis R., Internal Ops, Trusted. Her thumb hovered for half a second, then tapped. The line rang once. "Ms. Crockett?" a voice answered, crisp and a little breathless. Luis Reyes had always been efficient. Quiet, too. Years ago, he'd nearly lost his job after being wrongly implicated in a security breach tied to political campaign records. They'd pinned it on him because he didn't talk much, and because they thought no one would defend him. But Jasmine had. She read the audit logs herself. She cleared his name. No press, no favors, just the truth. From that day forward, Luis had treated her name like a password to action. "I need access logs," she said, skipping pleasantries. "Front desk terminal. Guest name was entered as Laverne Washington. I need to know if that record existed, and who deleted it." Luis didn't hesitate. "Give me 5 minutes," he replied. "You have 4, Jasmine said, then ended the call. She stepped out of the shadows and leaned against a marble pillar near the center of the lobby, eyes watching everything while pretending to watch nothing. Sloan was still at the desk, playing with the keyboard like a pianist who didn't know the song. Behind her, another employee handed out room cards to a couple in yoga wear. No urgency, no tension, like nothing had happened. Like a woman hadn't just been denied service in her husband's own hotel for no reason other than political prejudice wrapped in smiles. Jasmine's screen buzzed. A message. Her heart didn't skip, but her pulse sharpened, honed like the edge of a blade. She tapped to open it. A screenshot appeared, then another. And with them, the entire truth laid bare in black and white. Reservation confirmed. Guest Laverne Washington, Suite, 1503. Time 3:42 p.m. Confirmed via web, system ID, number MGX-7ALF. Then, 2 entries that flipped the atmosphere around her from merely unjust to undeniably criminal. 5:04 p.m. User Sloan.h searches Jasmine Crockett biography. 5:07 p.m. Manual cancellation of reservation MGX-7ALF by user Sloan.h. No reason provided. Jasmine stared at it for a full 10 seconds. Her chest was still, but every cell in her body was now coiled. This wasn't a suspicion. This wasn't a gut feeling. This was irrefutable evidence. Sloan hadn't made a mistake. She had identified Jasmine, Googled her, confirmed who she was, and then used her login credentials to erase her from the system. Jasmine took a deep breath. Her hands moved fast and exact. Screenshots saved to secure folder, backed up to a separate device, and mirrored to a hidden email she only used for sensitive materials. She copied the text logs into a file titled System Tamper Sloan H and uploaded that to the encrypted cloud. Then she paused, one long breath in, one breath out, before sliding her phone into her clutch. Her expression didn't change, but her entire presence did. She wasn't just Jasmine Crockett, a woman looking for a hotel room. She was now Jasmine Crockett, senior White House advisor, with documented proof that a front desk employee at her husband's hotel had targeted her politically and tried to erase her without a trace. And as she turned and walked back toward that desk, each step calm, precise, unrelenting, the lobby didn't know yet that it was seconds away from becoming a courtroom. Her courtroom. Sloan was still smiling when Jasmine returned. But this time, Jasmine didn't stop at the counter. She stood, centered, lit by the crystal chandelier above, and said, just loud enough for the room to hear, "I have the system logs. I know exactly what you did. And in less than 5 minutes, so will your employer." Right then, as if summoned by the weight of those words, the entrance doors slid open with a quiet sigh, and Marcus Crockett stepped into the room. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone commanded silence. The soft hum of conversation died mid-sentence. replaced by the sound of polished shoes meeting marble with military precision. Dressed in a jet black suit, crisp as a battlefield salute, Marcus moved like a man who had cleared war zones and boardrooms with the same cold efficiency. Broad-shouldered, eyes locked ahead, his jaw set like stone. He was the storm after the silence. Guests instinctively stepped aside. A concierge nearly dropped his clipboard. Even the music overhead seemed to mute itself. He scanned the lobby with the calm intensity of someone trained to assess threat levels in seconds. And then his eyes found Jasmine, standing tall, composed, and holding the truth like a loaded weapon. In that moment, the room no longer belonged to the hotel. It belonged to them. He scanned the lobby with the calm intensity of someone trained to assess threat levels in seconds. And then his eyes found Jasmine, standing tall, composed, and holding the truth like a loaded weapon. In that moment, the room no longer belonged to the hotel. It belonged to them. Marcus crossed the space between them in a straight line, guests and staff instinctively moving aside like they knew better. When he reached her, he didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, eyes searching. Then low and steady, he asked, "Are you okay?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Jasmine gave the faintest nod, controlled but tight. "I'm fine," she replied, then met his eyes. "But you need to see this." She handed him the phone, her screen already glowing with the system logs. Without breaking momentum, Jasmine turned slightly to face the front desk, lifting her voice just enough to be heard clearly, precisely. "Reservation confirmed at 3:42 p.m., she said. "Under the name Laverne Washington, Suite 1503. System ID is right here. No system error, no overlap. This wasn't an accident." She swiped to the next screen. At 5:04 p.m., the receptionist searched my name. Jasmine Crockett. 3 minutes later, she manually deleted the reservation. No reason given, just erased. The tone wasn't angry. It was clinical, surgical, and that made it more dangerous. Sloane's face paled. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard but didn't move. She looked from Jasmine to Marcus and back again. Her mouth opened slowly, words not quite forming. I followed internal guidelines," she said, voice now trembling under the pressure. "We're trained to preserve the tone of the hotel, to make sure the space stays inclusive, safe. I didn't mean anything by it. It wasn't meant to be personal." "It was targeted," Jasmine interrupted, calm but unshakable. "You saw my name, made a judgment, and acted on it. That's not training. That's bias." Sloane stammered, her composure cracking. "I didn't discriminate. I just thought it might be best to avoid a situation." Her words were unraveling fast. "I didn't know how others might feel." "You knew how you felt," Jasmine cut in, stepping forward, voice quiet but edged like steel. "You made a decision, not based on policy, not on process, but on a name. And now you want to explain it away as protection?" She took another step closer. "You weren't protecting the hotel. You were protecting your own comfort." The silence that followed Jasmine's final sentence wasn't just quiet, it was loaded. The kind of silence that comes just before something breaks. Sloane stood motionless behind the desk, her mouth slightly open, eyes flicking between Jasmine's unblinking stare and the phone still glowing with damning evidence. But then, slowly, Marcus stepped forward. Not like a man angry, but like one who'd made a decision. His movements were measured, deliberate, and dangerously calm. His presence pulled the weight of the room toward him. Even people in the lounge who hadn't heard the full story instinctively knew something serious was unfolding. He stopped directly in front of the counter, not looming, not posturing, just grounded, unshakable, like a wall that wouldn't move even if the building came down around it. His eyes locked onto Sloane's with a level of stillness that made her physically recoil half an inch. His voice, when it came, was low, cold, and surgically precise. Not loud, not theatrical, just final. "You just refused to serve my wife in the hotel I built, brick by brick, room by room. My name is on the deed, the title, and every inch of this foundation. So let me ask you, do you even understand what you've just done?" The question landed like a dropped hammer. Sloane's lips parted, but no sound came. Her mind clearly scrambled for a response, but no excuse dared show its face. She looked down at the desk, then at Jasmine, then back to Marcus, desperately searching for some lifeline that no longer existed. Her shoulders sank slightly, her face flushing, caught between humiliation and fear. But Marcus didn't stop there. He took another breath, controlled, intentional, and leaned in just enough to make sure she couldn't look away. You didn't make a mistake. You made a decision. You searched her name. You deleted her room. And then, when she stood in front of you, with proof, you dismissed her again. Why? Because of who she is? Because of what you think she stands for? His tone wasn't accusatory. It was declarative, like reading out a list of charges. You thought no one would notice. You thought your judgment call was safe, quiet, tucked behind a screen, wrapped in company slogans about values and energy. But let me be very clear with you. That woman right there? He pointed to Jasmine, but didn't look away from Sloan. She's not just a guest. She's not just my wife. She's the one who stood up when others stayed silent. In Congress, in courtrooms, in crises. And today, she stood up to you. The pause that followed was thunderous in its stillness. Sloan looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Her voice, when it finally came, was little more than a whisper. I didn't mean harm. I thought I was doing what the brand expected. Marcus straightened, his face hard as granite. If this is what you think our brand stands for, he said, voice calm but deadly, then you don't belong here. And with that, the air shifted again. It wasn't just about a reservation anymore. It was about power, responsibility, and the line between silent bias and public consequence. And for the first time since Jasmine had walked into that lobby, the balance of power had returned to its rightful hands. The weight of Marcus's final words still lingered in the air, echoing louder than any shout could have. The lobby had gone silent, not the comfortable, professional silence of a luxury hotel, but the tense, fragile stillness of a courtroom seconds before the verdict drops. Sloan stood behind the front desk like a statue in freefall, rigid on the outside, but clearly crumbling from within. Her eyes darted between Jasmine, Marcus, the screen, the crowd gathering in quiet curiosity, and back again. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, but she said nothing, because deep down she knew. This wasn't just disciplinary. This was final. Marcus took one step closer, his tone colder than it had been all day. You're relieved of duty, effective now. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. But the calm in his voice was more terrifying than any raised fist could be. Sloane's lips parted, perhaps to protest, perhaps to plead, but no sound came. Her hands trembled as they hovered above the keyboard she no longer had the right to touch. Please, wait, she finally said, her voice cracking, barely more than a whisper. Can we talk in private? I didn't mean for this to happen like this. Marcus didn't even blink. This is your version of private. You made it public the moment you decided to erase someone else's place in this building, based on a name. He gestured subtly to the phone Jasmine still held. The screen dimmed now, but the evidence burned in everyone's mind. You tried to bury her identity under protocol, and now protocol's burying you. Sloane's posture collapsed an inch further, her voice shrinking into desperation. But I was just trying to protect the culture here. I thought that's what you wanted this place to be. Safe. Inclusive. Inclusive, Marcus cut in, his tone sharp but level. You don't create safety by deciding who deserves to be here based on their politics. You create fear. You create division. You turned a five-star hotel into a filtered echo chamber. That was never the mission. Guests nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Phones were still. No one was filming. This was too real, too raw. It wasn't entertainment. It was justice unfolding in front of them. Marcus turned to a nearby security officer stationed by the concierge. His command came with calm authority. Escort Ms. Hayes to HR. She has 10 minutes to collect her belongings. After that, she's no longer authorized on the property. The officer nodded and began walking forward without a word. Sloane's eyes welled, her hands clutching the edge of the desk as if it could stop what was already in motion. I gave everything to this job, she muttered, barely audible. I tried to do the right thing. No, Jasmine said softly but firmly, stepping beside Marcus now. You tried to control who belonged, based on what you believed was right. That's not justice. That's arrogance. Sloane didn't reply. She turned slowly, shoulders slumped, her name badge still pinned to her chest like a label that no longer applied. As she walked out from behind the desk, her footsteps echoed more loudly than before. Not because of her heels, but because they were the steps of someone who had just lost everything in the place they thought they controlled. She didn't look back, because there was nothing left to look back to. The hush in the lobby remained thick, almost ceremonial, when the side door near the concierge suddenly swung open with a sharp click. Mark Ellison, the hotel's general manager, appeared, slightly out of breath, his suit rumpled, the skin beneath his collar damp with nervous sweat. He wasn't composed, he wasn't prepared. He looked like a man who'd just run into a meeting he was supposed to be leading, but didn't know what room it was in. He took a few hurried steps toward the desk, scanning the room, the energy, the expressions. It only took him a second to realize something irreversible had already happened. I just heard there was an issue at the front, he said, his voice pitched too high to sound in control. I didn't know how serious it was, or I would have stepped in sooner. I was in the back reviewing vendor invoices. He trailed off as his eyes met Marcus's, then Jasmine's. Their silence was far more intimidating than shouting ever could be. He tried again. I didn't realize she had escalated things. Sloane's always been vocal, yes, but I was trying to avoid direct conflict. She's passionate. I didn't want to stifle that. Marcus took one step forward, his expression unreadable. But his voice? It cut through the space with unflinching authority. Are you in charge here, Mark? Or do your employees run this hotel while you hide in the back? Mark's mouth opened slightly, but Marcus didn't wait for a reply. He kept going, tone ice cold. You let a junior staffer take control of the lobby. You let her erase a confirmed guest booking without reason. Not just any guest, my wife. You didn't just miss this, you allowed it. Mark raised both hands, palms out, as if to block the blow that had already landed. I didn't know she'd crossed that line. She's always talked about inclusivity and guest experience. I thought she meant well. I didn't want to stifle her expression or create tension among the staff. It's a fine line between allowing space and pushing back too hard. That's when Jasmine stepped in, quiet, precise, but devastating. You didn't draw a line, Mark. You erased one. You let her turn personal beliefs into a weapon. You let someone's comfort zone become the limit for everyone else's rights. Mark blinked rapidly. I understand it looks bad, but I was just trying to create a work culture where people could express themselves freely. At the expense of your guests? Jasmine asked, her tone low but cutting. You call this freedom? She didn't express herself. She deleted me. From the system, from the lobby, from my own husband's hotel, and you let her. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was crushing. Mark's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His eyes flicked around the lobby, now filled with witnesses who were no longer pretending not to listen. A guest standing near the elevator muttered, "Unbelievable," under his breath. Another guest near the bar folded her arms, watching like a jury member waiting for the judge to speak. You didn't protect the culture, Marcus said flatly. You protected your own comfort. You avoided hard conversations, and now we're cleaning up your cowardice. There was nowhere for Mark to look that didn't reflect his failure back at him. Not in Jasmine's calm fury, not in Marcus's deadly stillness, not in the quiet condemnation of a lobby that had just seen how leadership fails. Not with malice, but with silence. The tension in the lobby had shifted again, but it hadn't lifted. Sloane was gone. The truth had been dragged out into the light. And Mark stood at the center of it all, sweat clinging to his collar, his eyes hollowed with the weight of what he'd just been told. He didn't argue anymore. He didn't explain. He just stood there, absorbing the judgment, the embarrassment, and the cold realization that everything he'd tried to avoid had just exploded under his watch. Marcus let the silence stretch for a beat longer, then finally turned to Jasmine. Their eyes met. No words, just that unspoken conversation built over years of mutual trust. Then Marcus looked back at Mark. You stay, he said simply, the words falling like stone. For now. Mark's eyes widened slightly, the smallest flicker of relief flashing across his face. But Marcus wasn't finished. You're on notice. One more incident, one more lapse, one more case of selective blindness like today, and you won't be walking out with a warning. You'll be walking out with your things. The words were calm, almost too calm, and that made them even more final. Mark nodded quickly, trying to compose himself, but Marcus raised a hand, cutting him off before he could speak. Don't thank me. This isn't grace. It's a contract. Then he stepped back, allowing Jasmine to step forward. The energy shifted again, not softer, sharper. This wasn't a man issuing a final word. This was a woman beginning a restructuring. Jasmine's tone was clean, clear, and absolute. Effective immediately, I want a second layer of leadership in place. Someone I trust. Someone who doesn't flinch when values collide with pressure. She took a slow step closer to Mark, who blinked at her, unsure where this was going. You'll retain your title for now, but you will no longer operate without oversight. Mark swallowed hard. What kind of oversight? I'm bringing someone in from my DC office, Jasmine replied. She's a senior aide who worked on my internal ethics task force. She handled more personnel misconduct cases in 1 year than you've likely seen in your career. She's firm, fair, and doesn't ask twice. Her voice didn't rise, but the weight in it was unmistakable. She'll serve as Deputy General Manager, effective immediately upon arrival. Marcus gave a small nod beside her. It wasn't a suggestion, it was done. Mark shifted uncomfortably. You mean she'll report to me, or she'll report to both of us, Jasmine answered without hesitation. You'll operate as equals. Every decision regarding hiring, dismissal, and disciplinary action will be reviewed by her. If there's even the hint of political bias in how guests or staff are treated, she'll escalate it directly to my office. And if you so much as blink the wrong way at it, you're out. The lobby had thinned slightly by now, but the few guests still lingering near the bar or the lounge remained rooted in place. They weren't rubbernecking for gossip anymore. They were watching something unusual unfold. Accountability, delivered in real time, without PR buffers or legal departments. Just truth, consequence, order being reestablished by the very people it had tried to exclude. Mark was silent for a long moment, not in defiance, just in realization. Understood, he said finally. His voice was quiet, tired, real. What's her name? Jasmine didn't hesitate. Elise Morton. You'll be getting an email from her within the hour. She stepped back, letting her words sink in. You're not being replaced, Mark. Not yet. But you are being watched closely. If you're willing to prove that leadership still means something to you, you'll have that chance. But don't confuse this for leniency. It's structure. What should have been here from the beginning? Marcus nodded, folding his arms across his chest. We built this place on excellence, not excuses. It wasn't meant to be a political theater. It's not a battleground. It's a business. And right now, it needs leaders who remember that. Mark nodded again, this time slower, more grounded. Yes, sir. Jasmine took one final look around the lobby. The crystal light above still glittered against the polished marble floors. The grand piano in the corner, untouched during the confrontation, sat in perfect stillness, a symbol of order. Elegance, silence. She turned back to Marcus, voice lower now, meant just for him. This can't happen again. Not here. Not in our name. It won't, he said, with the certainty of a man who'd made promises on battlefields and in boardrooms alike. Jasmine exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in resolve. I want the staff rebriefed. New policy language. I want political neutrality spelled out clearly in the employee handbook. And I want Elise to be given direct access to every training, every personnel file, every complaint. Marcus nodded. Done. And Mark, she added, turning one last time to the manager, who now stood straighter, but still shaken. You're being offered something rare, a second chance. Don't mistake that for immunity. Leadership doesn't mean avoiding conflict. It means standing between your team and failure. And today you didn't. I hear you, Mark said, quieter still. I hear both of you, Loud and clear. Jasmine offered no response. She didn't need to. The rules had been rewritten, the hierarchy redefined. A new presence was coming, and the leash had been pulled tight. This wasn't punishment. This was structure. And from here forward, structure meant survival. And as the lobby slowly returned to motion, bellhops moving, guests whispering, phones lighting up, one truth lingered louder than the rest. Order had been restored, but under new eyes. The final conversation with Mark had barely concluded when Jasmine turned and began walking toward the center of the lobby, heels echoing sharply across the marble like a metronome of justice. Her posture was upright, commanding, not the posture of a woman who had simply won an argument, but one who was now writing new rules. A hush fell again, instinctive. Every remaining guest, every staff member lingering near the edge of the room, seemed to pause, sensing that the next words spoken were no longer about one incident. They were about the future. Jasmine stopped beneath the chandelier, the same place she had stood hours earlier when she was dismissed with a smile. Now she stood not as a guest, not even as a woman wronged, but as a leader about to redefine the walls around her. "I want everyone listening," she began, her voice calm but deliberate, "because what I say next won't be repeated. It will be enforced." Marcus stood just behind her, arms crossed, a silent wall of support. Across the lobby, Mark lingered near the edge, pale but still present. Two junior front desk agents stood stiffly behind the counter, wide-eyed and silent. "We are implementing a zero-tolerance policy effective immediately," Jasmine continued. "Any staff member, regardless of rank or tenure, who refuses service to a guest based on personal, political, religious, or ideological reasons," she paused, scanning the room, "will be terminated on the spot. No deliberation, no hearing, no second chance." The words hit like a shot of ice through the room. There was no anger in her tone, only steel, controlled, final. "This building," she said, gesturing around her with one hand, "is not a platform for personal agendas. It is not a stage for activism disguised as hospitality. It is a business. But more importantly, it is a promise to every guest who walks through those doors that they will be treated with fairness, with dignity, and without prejudice." A young man near the lounge, a guest who had witnessed the earlier confrontation, nodded silently to himself. A woman with a suitcase near the elevators lowered her phone, visibly stunned by the clarity and force of the announcement. "Let me be clear," Jasmine said, her voice lowering an octave, but somehow becoming even more powerful. "We don't care who someone voted for. We don't care what podcast they listen to. We don't care what sticker is on their luggage or what article they wrote 10 years ago. If they've booked a room at Magnolia Grand, they are entitled to every ounce of respect this brand was built on." She stepped forward now, slowly, like a closing argument being delivered to a jury made up of everyone watching, guests, employees, and the world outside. "Bias of any kind has no place behind this front desk," she said. "Personal opinion is not an excuse for professional failure. If you want to make political statements, do it on your time. If you want to decide who's worthy of comfort, this isn't the building for you. Because Magnolia Grand does not just offer rooms. We offer a reflection of what fairness looks like when it's real, not performative." She turned to Marcus, who nodded once. Jasmine faced the staff once more, eyes scanning each face, letting the gravity of the moment settle in for good. "There will be no memos, no vague HR seminars. This is the new standard. Clear, immediate, absolute." Her voice sharpened at the end, a final strike of the gavel. "This isn't about being neutral. It's about being just." Someone near the concierge clapped once, then again, and soon it spread, a slow ripple of quiet applause, not for theatrics, but for truth. Even those who hadn't seen everything earlier could feel it. The building had shifted. The culture had changed. Marcus stepped forward then, speaking for the first time since the order was given. His voice was low but resonant, measured and grounded, like the foundation of the hotel itself. Magnolia Grand wasn't built to echo opinions. It was built to outlast them. What happened today won't happen again, because now we don't just have a policy, we have a principle. Jasmine nodded, then delivered the final line. the one that would define this moment long after the emails were archived and the guests checked out. "This is not just a hotel," she said quietly, but with a conviction that carried across every polished surface. "It is a reflection of what real fairness looks like, and real fairness doesn't ask who you are. It proves who we are." The room stood still, not in fear, but in understanding. The rules had changed, and with them, so had the future of the Magnolia Grand. As the last words left Jasmine's lips and the staff dispersed in stunned silence, the air inside Magnolia Grand finally began to move again. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. A jazz melody, long forgotten in the background, returned through the speakers. Bellhops resumed their duties, guests checked their phones, and the illusion of normalcy tried to patch itself together. But something irreversible had already taken root. The hotel hadn't just survived a scandal, it had been transformed by it, and outside its marble walls, the world was about to find out. Because what happened in the lobby didn't stay there. Within 20 minutes of Sloane's dismissal, the first video went live. A guest who had quietly filmed the part of the confrontation, Jasmine's calm voice, Marcus's verdict, Sloane's stunned expression, uploaded the clip to X with a caption that simply read, "She didn't raise her voice once, still shut it all down." Crockett vs. Bias, Joshua Rolls-Royce reception. The post spread like wildfire. By the time Jasmine and Marcus had stepped into the executive suite upstairs for a debrief with senior staff, the hashtag had already gone viral. Within the hour, 3 different hashtags were trending nationally: Crockett and Bias, Justice at Magnolia, and the unexpected crowd favorite, Rolls-Royce reception. A callback to Jasmine's friend Marcus Langston's story, now woven into the mythos of the event. The online response fractured fast. On one side, a tidal wave of conservative voices hailed Jasmine as a warrior against ideological overreach. They reposted the video with captions like, "That's how you handle woke discrimination, cold, clean, and with receipts. She just taught every CEO in America how to lead under fire. When the left plays gatekeeper, she brings the gates down." Meme pages lit up with edits of Jasmine photoshopped into courtroom dramas, war rooms, and classic hero poses. Political influencers called her the anti-cancel queen. Military veteran accounts posted side-by-side photos of her, standing at the desk and American flags, waving at half-mast, calling it a victory for real freedom. One conservative commentator tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett didn't cancel anyone. She exposed what happens when personal politics invade professional spaces." But as quickly as praise arrived, so did the firestorm from the other side. Progressive accounts blasted the video with captions like, "So we're firing people now for their values?" Another powerful woman uses her platform to silence someone beneath her. Magnolia Grand just became the corporate arm of a conservative vendetta. A well-known activist reposted the clip with a scathing comment. Jasmine Crockett had an opportunity to educate, not retaliate. She chose to flex instead. Power abused, not justice. Blue-check academics called it a dangerous precedent. Liberal influencers claim that firing Sloane publicly was an intimidation tactic dressed up as principle. A few even accused Jasmine of enacting corporate authoritarianism in the name of decorum. And through it all, Jasmine said nothing. Not yet. She sat at the edge of the hotel suite's large desk, watching the mentions roll in like bullets across the screen. Notifications, articles, threads, praise, rage, chaos. The storm had migrated from the lobby to the feed, and it was moving fast. Marcus stood behind her, arms folded, reading the headlines over her shoulder. "They're not mad about what you did," he said quietly. "They're mad you didn't ask permission to do it." Jasmine didn't reply immediately. She was watching a video on repeat. The moment she held up her phone and said, "You didn't make a mistake, you made a choice." She watched the clip with the detached calm of someone watching security footage of a robbery they already stopped. Then she set her phone down. "I don't care if they're mad," she said finally, "but I do care if they get to twist the truth." She picked up the phone again, opened the X app, and tapped out a single line. No hashtags, no tagging, just the truth. "I didn't punish her for what she believed. I held her accountable for what she did." It's action that matters, not ideology. Truth is what they fear most. She hit post. The tweet went nuclear. Within 5 minutes, it had 20,000 likes and climbing. Screenshots of it were reposted by legal experts, journalists, political operatives, and hotel management groups around the country. It was quoted on television. One anchor called it the cleanest rebuttal to the culture war ever posted in under 280 characters. In group chats across DC and Manhattan, corporate leaders and media strategists texted each other. She just outplayed both sides. But Jasmine wasn't trying to win both sides. She was trying to tell the truth. She turned to Marcus and said, "This wasn't about power. It was about principle. If we let people rewrite that, they'll turn this whole thing into noise." He nodded once. "Then we keep the signal strong." And so they did. Over the next 24 hours, more footage surfaced. One clip caught Sloan saying offhandedly to a coworker, "We have to protect our space from people like her." Another showed Jasmine standing silent while being denied her reservation, contrasting the media narrative claiming she'd been aggressive. Screenshots of the booking logs, redacted but time-stamped, were released with Jasmine's consent, proving the deletion and the search history. Every post backed by fact. Every accusation met with proof. A journalist from a national outlet messaged Jasmine's office asking for an interview. She declined. Instead, she posted again. "You don't fight discrimination by changing who gets excluded. You fight it by refusing to exclude at all. Magnolia Grand is open to everyone because fairness doesn't check your beliefs at the door." It was retweeted by veterans, civil rights attorneys, even a handful of silent centrists who rarely weighed in at all. And slowly the conversation began to shift. Not entirely, not cleanly. There were still voices demanding boycotts, still protest threads and digital petitions accusing her of weaponizing professionalism. But there was something stronger underneath it. Clarity. People could see what had happened, not through ideology, but through action, through behavior. Through the quiet, relentless calm Jasmine had carried from the moment she'd been denied until the moment she rewrote the policy. And that's what stuck. Not the headlines, not the hashtags, but the image of a woman who never raised her voice and still reshaped the rules. The door to the presidential suite closed with a gentle click, but the moment it did, the tension shifted. The roar of the lobby, the weight of judgment, the buzz of phones and whispers, gone. In its place, silence, velvet thick and loaded. Jasmine stepped across the threshold first, her heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet. Victor followed her in, unfastening the button on his blazer as he set his phone on the bar counter. The suite around them, high ceilings, hand-carved walnut, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Austin skyline, should have offered comfort. But in this moment, it felt less like a retreat and more like a war room. Jasmine didn't sit. She walked slowly to the edge of the wide glass window and looked out over the city. The lights below twinkled like they belonged to another world, a quieter one. Her reflection stared back at her, poised, collected, but with eyes that hadn't blinked since the moment Sloan denied her. She folded her arms, letting the weight of the day settle into her bones. Victor finally broke the silence. "You didn't just hold the line today," he said, voice low and worn. "You redrew the whole battlefield." She didn't turn. "And tomorrow," she said, "they'll try to move it again." Victor stepped beside her. For a moment, they said nothing, just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching the world they built glow beneath them. "You know this wasn't just about a reservation," he said. "I know," she replied. "It never was." He turned toward her, finally removing the mask of composure he'd worn all day. "Then let's make sure this doesn't stop here." Now she looked at him, sharp, deliberate, searching his face for weakness, for doubt, for any part of him that might be holding back. She found none, only fire. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking we make today the blueprint," Victor said. "Not just for Magnolia Grand, for every single property in the chain. We standardize the policy, hardline the ethics, and vet the culture down to the root. I want no gray areas, no more interpretation dressed as principle." Jasmine's gaze didn't soften, but it deepened. She turned away from the window, walked slowly toward the marble-topped bar, and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. No ice. She handed him one. Then finally sat down. I agree, she said, but we don't start with rules. We start with the why. Victor raised an eyebrow. The why? Jasmine nodded, voice quieter but tighter now, like a coiled wire. Because if we only react to today, we lose tomorrow. This can't just be about fixing a PR nightmare. It has to be about setting a new gold standard for service, for fairness, for courage. Victor took a long sip from his glass. You're thinking bigger than policy. I'm thinking bigger than hotels. She stood again, pacing now, not nervously but tactically. Look around. This country is divided, not by borders or ballots, but by fear. Fear of being misjudged, fear of being misunderstood, and fear of speaking truth when someone might call it oppression. That fear has seeped into every room, into classrooms, offices, and yes, lobbies. We walked into it today, and we shut it down. But if we don't turn that moment into structure, it'll be nothing but noise. Victor listened in silence. Jasmine's voice had changed. She wasn't talking like a guest or even a partner. She was talking like a strategist, a force. I want a task force, she said finally. Internal, multidisciplinary, not just HR or legal. I want sociologists, behavioral psychologists, people who understand where tension hides. I want them to build training that's not just compliance, it's clarity. I want managers to stop being afraid of offending their staff and start learning how to lead them. Victor set his glass down. You really think it'll work? I think it has to, she said, because if we don't do it, someone else will, and they'll do it with fear instead of truth. He exhaled slowly, pacing toward her. So we turn Magnolia into more than a hotel chain. We turn it into a model, Jasmine said, for the service industry, for leadership, for how to have standards in an age obsessed with feelings. Victor stared at her for a long moment, then cracked a quiet smile. God, I love it when you go full court press. She allowed herself a flicker of amusement, just for a breath. It's the DC in me. You never really left, he said. No, she replied, stepping closer. But today, DC came home. There was a beat of silence. Then Jasmine walked over to the built-in desk in the corner of the suite. She opened her laptop, fingers moving like muscle memory. Within seconds, she was drafting a document. New Magnolia Leadership Ethics Protocol, Phase 1. The title alone hit like a declaration of war on ambiguity. Victor leaned over her shoulder. What's the first clause? Jasmine typed slowly and deliberately. Any employee who denies service to a guest based on personal bias, political, cultural, or ideological, will be subject to immediate termination. No exception, no deliberation. Action, not motive, determines accountability. Victor nodded, then reached for his phone. I'll have our legal team and the board review this tonight. They'll push back, Jasmine said, not looking up. Let them, Victor replied. They either get on board or get out of the way. Jasmine's fingers stopped. She closed the laptop softly and turned back to him. Her expression was calm, but burning. I've defended you on the House floor, she said, voice lower now. When they came after your name, your work, your record, I stood between you and every political sniper in that room. Victor stepped closer. And now? She smiled, faint but fierce. Now I protect you here, in your own house, where the arrows don't come with microphones, they come with fake smiles and system glitches. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. They both knew what that meant. Jasmine walked slowly back toward the window, glass in hand. The city still sparkled below, unaware of the war room that towered above it. She stared out for a long moment, then turned slightly over her shoulder. And if anyone still doubts what I'm willing to do to defend justice, let them try. She turned fully now, fire in her eyes. Let them test what it costs to underestimate a woman with facts, receipts, and power. Let them feel the price of treating fairness like an accessory. Victor crossed his arms. So this is our line in the sand? No, Jasmine said. This is the steel wall they can't see until they hit it. The room was quiet again, but this silence was different. It wasn't the hush of uncertainty. It was the silence that follows a decision, The silence that says, there's no turning back now. And the world would soon discover Magnolia Grand was no longer just a hotel. It was a message, a warning, and a standard. One that would stand, unmoved, no matter who tried to walk in and rewrite the rules. The soft click of the suite door echoed like punctuation. Outside, the Magnolia Grand was slowly returning to its polished rhythm. Gloved staff moving with grace, guests sipping cocktails in the bar, conversations resuming beneath glittering chandeliers. But up here, on the top floor, the air remained taut. Jasmine stood still by the wide glass windows, arms crossed, watching the city breathe beneath her. Behind her, Victor sat quietly on the leather sofa, turning his whiskey glass in his hand, but saying nothing. The war was over, for now. But in its wake came something even heavier, the meaning of it all. I keep thinking about how easy it is, Jasmine said at last, her voice low, level. How easy it is to use freedom as an excuse to hurt someone, to twist the words until the wound looks like principle. Victor looked up, eyes locked on hers. He knew she wasn't speaking rhetorically. She was building to something. People always talk about their right to speak, she continued, turning slowly from the window. But no one talks about what happens when speech is used as a shield, when it becomes the reason someone gets erased. She took a breath, steady and deliberate. That's what happened down there, in our lobby. A woman weaponized her personal beliefs, dressed them up in the language of progress, and used them to decide who deserved to be here. Victor nodded slightly, still quiet. And the worst part, Jasmine said, voice tightening, she thought she was doing the right thing. She walked slowly to the edge of the table, opened her phone, and watched as the notification count climbed. Tens of thousands of mentions. Videos. Hashtags. Praise and fury pouring in by the second. She let the screen dim, then set it face down on the table. I don't care what side they're on, she said. Left, right. It doesn't matter. What matters is they're both missing the point. Victor raised an eyebrow. And what's the point? Jasmine looked at him, and when she spoke, her voice was colder, sharper. Freedom of speech is not a weapon, and it sure as hell isn't a pass to strip others of theirs. The silence that followed was electric. Victor leaned back, letting her words hang. Then he said carefully, they'll accuse you of censorship. She nodded. They already have. They'll say you fired someone because you didn't like her views. She wasn't fired for what she believed, Jasmine said. She was fired for what she did. And there it was, the heart of it. She didn't just disagree with me, Jasmine continued, walking slowly around the room. She acted. She used her position to deny service, based on nothing but personal judgment. That's not freedom. That's control. That's the exact opposite of what free speech is supposed to defend. Victor stood now, joining her at the window. So what do we tell them? Jasmine turned to face him fully. Her posture straightened, her shoulders squared. She didn't blink. We tell them this, she said. That disagreement is not danger. That protest is not oppression. And that if your idea of freedom means denying someone else's dignity, then you've never understood freedom at all. She picked up her phone again and typed, slowly, deliberately. Freedom of speech is not a license to erase others because you disagree with them. Don't confuse your right to protest with the right to oppress. She hit post. It took less than 30 seconds for the tweet to go viral. Across X, replies flooded in. Some cheered. She nailed it. That's the line the whole country needs to hear right now. Crockett just taught a masterclass in accountability without censorship. This is how you lead in the middle of chaos. Others attacked. She's punishing people for thought crimes. Authoritarian in heels. Funny how justice looks a lot like control when it's your politics getting enforced. Jasmine scrolled through them all, unshaken. I don't need them to agree, she said aloud. I just need them to understand. Victor turned toward her, voice low. And if they don't? She looked out at the skyline. Lights flickered across office towers. Headlights moved like stars across highways. The world was watching, and that's exactly what she wanted. Then let them try to fight it, she said. Let them shout. Let them spin. But they'll never be able to erase the truth. Not this time. Victor walked to the sideboard, poured another drink, and handed it to her. "You've made this hotel a battlefield," he said. "No," Jasmine corrected, taking the glass. "They did. I just refused to let them win on our ground." There was a pause. Victor sipped, then spoke carefully. "What happens now?" Jasmine's eyes didn't leave the window. "Now," she said, "now we make sure they can't turn this into another culture war talking point. Now we set the standard." She stepped away from the glass, back toward the table, where her laptop was already open. She began typing again, this time drafting an internal statement for the Magnolia Grand chain. It wasn't policy, it was doctrine. "Our commitment is simple. No guest will be refused service on the basis of personal, political, or ideological identity. Any employee who violates this principle will be subject to immediate dismissal, not because of what they believe, but because of what they do. There will be no room for bias in a space that promises safety to all." She looked over it once, then saved it, then stood up. Victor looked at her. "You're not done." She nodded. "Not until this becomes more than a moment, until it becomes a message." He smiled faintly. "You always were better at making things permanent." She looked back at him, a flicker of warmth crossing her face. "I defended you in D.C., Victor, in a chamber full of wolves with pens. I stood between you and their spin because I knew the truth. And now," he asked, "now I defend you here, in the place that carries your name, your reputation, our promise." Her eyes darkened slightly. "And if anyone still doubts what I'm willing to do to protect justice, let them try me." Victor raised his glass. "To truth." Jasmine tapped hers gently against his. "To consequences." They drank in silence. The suite, bathed in low amber light, felt less like a retreat and more like Command Central now. Outside, the city buzzed on. But inside this room, the real shift had happened. Jasmine walked back to the window once more and looked out. Not at the skyline, but at the reflection of herself. A woman who had walked into a hotel lobby and been told she didn't belong. Who had faced dismissal not just of her booking, but of her worth. And who had answered not with anger, but with clarity, with proof, with consequence. This wasn't about ego. This was about integrity. And in that moment, one final thought anchored itself in her chest like steel. If freedom becomes a weapon to silence others, it stops being freedom. And if you use your voice to erase someone else's place in the world, you're not speaking freely. You're just hiding your prejudice in prettier words. And Jasmine Crockett had run out of patience for pretty words. It was time for plain ones. And plain ones, when backed by truth, were impossible to erase. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.